According to Barbara Blake Hanna, director of the Jamaica International Film Festival, people come to Jamaica to make films simply and primarily because Jamaica is world famous as a place where the culture, music, scenery, and history provide multiple opportunities for films of all kinds to be made. With movies like Harder They Come, Rockers, Dancehall Queen, and many more, the Jamaican film industry has what it takes to become one of the premier destinations for film production. But what is really happening? We will chit-chat with 3 filmmakers positioning themselves for success. Storm Salter, a graduate of the Los Angeles Film School, released his debut feature, the award-winning film Better Must Come, in 2011. The actor, writer, and director is now the filmmaker in residence for the academic year of 2014 to 2015 at the University of the West Indies. Your award-winning debut film, Better Must Come, was well received. Tell us about the process that brought it to life.
I was just very fascinated with the 1970s. Very interested in like Cold War and geopolitics, that type of thing. And in my research on that globally, I kind of really discovered what happened in Jamaica in the 70s, in the even 60s leading up to that. And I realized it was something I never learned in school, something that they don't teach kids, our recent post-colonial history, which is the reason we are formed as a nation as we are. They don't teach that. So I'm like, well, we need to find a way to step into this world. And if nothing else, you know, my Better Must Come is about a single character or group of characters in a particular story, in a particular time, in a particular community in the late 1970s. But what it is, and I think, is a window in or foot into the door of what that is. And now you can jump onto YouTube or look at documentaries, look at, you know, and start to learn about our own recent history, you know, which is very relevant to understanding who we are right now.
You were the film's director,
Yes.
screenwriter,
Yeah.
and director of photography. Why so many roles?
That's just the way I guess I create so far. I wrote the screenplay because it didn't exist yet, and I had to write it. And sometimes you end up becoming a writer, not because it's your natural approach, but because you need a story. You know what I mean? And but I'm a cinematographer and I'm a director, and those are 2 things I always do together. They're kind of inseparable for me.
Was Better Must Come your project with the biggest budget?
Feature films just require a lot to get made, even when you're doing it very inexpensively and very guerrilla and very low budget. You're moving, you have a lot of people, you have a lot of manpower, you have a lot of, and woman power too. You have a lot of moving parts, time, editing, costuming, feeding people, you know what I mean, promoting the work. So, I mean, it's quite an undertaking.
How was Better Must Come financed?
Better Must Come had an executive producer, a set of executive producers, investors. Was very fortunate to create a story and then have people that basically, on reading it and on knowing it and on believing in my ability, saying yes, let's finance this and do it. So yeah, I had an investor that pretty much raised the funding to do it. But then on the other end, I did a film along with the New Caribbean Cinema Collective. We did a film together called Ring the Alarm, which is a collection of short stories by all the different directors. And those, we put them together as a feature film. So in the end, it was presented as a feature film. But we made it in a way that was very low budget. All the individual pieces were shot in a single day, and it cost us way less, and we basically paid out of our own pockets, you know what I mean? And that was a feature film that was made for maybe, I don't know, 12,000 US.
Describe the filmmaking process, or at least the way you go about doing it.
Yeah. Honestly, I think I don't, thank God when you have good producers and like good crews, because they are able to create the structure around which you as the like creative voice can exist. So I don't like too much, I don't like a lot of the technical and organizational duties of like what it takes to put a production together. I like to just be creative all the time if I could. I like to think about the shots, I like to shoot, I like to design the cinematography, I like to think about the story, I like to work with actors, I like to just vibe and be in a zone and find myself in a creative space so I can make the right decisions at the moment when the work is being captured to create great work. You know, filmmaking is not a singular thing. I mean, the director is like the captain of the ship and kind of the one responsible for the overall creative delivery of the thing. But at the end of the day, you need a really good team of people. I mean, the better your team is, the better the work.
How do you choose your team of people?
I just always continue to work with people that I like working with, that do well on set.
Should a filmmaker be formally trained?
Look, filmmakers have to be trained one way or the other, whether it is in film school or by taking workshops or taking a course, or not, and just by working on set and working from the basic job of maybe being a production assistant and watching how it's done, and then having some, working under someone, because one way or the other, even when you go to film school and leave and get onto set, you still start your education right there again. So it doesn't have to happen. I've worked with great filmmakers that have not had formal training, right? And so it's not a necessity, but you're either gonna try and fail and try again and fail and learn that way. I mean, one way or the other, great filmmakers, people making good work, they get there by some form of training.
Should more be done to teach film making locally?
Yeah, definitely there should be more done, but I feel like there definitely is a lot of energy on the way to do so. I know at UWI, it's happening.
What advice would you give to newcomers who want to get into the industry?
Just, it's possible to get in there. I mean, as we said earlier, getting the camera equipment and the sound gear is not very hard. There's an abundance of technical filmmaking talent here in terms of there is great camera operators, cinematographers, directors, sound people, musicians. I mean, all the pieces are here. You just have to work on having a great idea. And with the New Caribbean Cinema model, it was very much about, with no money, how do we create something? And that model was, we created stories that were short, that could be achieved in a single day. And therefore, we could go to our peers that have a mutual vision of moving forward Caribbean cinema and say, look, let's give us a day. The actors want to be on screen. Crew is down to work. Everybody wants to play their role and create something that's as lasting as film. So, and within a day or 2 days, they'll do it for free. So we just figured out a methodology that took the money element out of it. And that's always very helpful. And I think people don't need to sit back and say, I can't do it because of the money. Okay, you can't do that idea. Don't give up on the idea that costs a lot of money to make. Just think about other ideas that are achievable now. Because you take one step towards something, it takes 2 steps towards you. And that's something very real. That's going in the positive and in the negative. You know what I'm saying? So if you just do the work, you're either going to create something great, or you're going to create something that was kind of okay, but you learn what was not right, and then you focus on that. Then when you wheel and come again, now you come again with everything more intact. You know, I had to make things that weren't as good as I thought they were to then make something that was good.
If nothing else, Jamaica should be producing more than 1 feature film every 5 years.
Wait, Rasta, what are you doing inside there?
Remove ya!
Alison Harrison, a filmmaker and owner of Factory 75, a motion picture film company, had a chit-chat with us about being a local filmmaker.
I was studying math, physics, and computer science. And one day, a friend of mine invited me to a show at the Philip Sherlock Center for the Creative Arts. And I saw what was going on with the lights and the sound, and I was just like, how do you get into this? And they invited me to come by for a rehearsal, and I joined one of the societies there, the Dramatic Arts Society. And from there, it's just been, that was, I think, where all of this passion comes from. After leaving UA, I went and I worked at the CPTC, the Creative Production and Training Center. And while there, I got exposed to cameras, lights, set life. And I was like, wow, this is pretty amazing. How, like, what else is there to learn? And from CPTC, I worked there for 3 years. And then I applied to film school, and then I went away. I came back home. People are asking me why. I'm like, why are you here? You should be in New York, you should be in LA. I worked freelance in the industry with other filmmakers doing sound predominantly, sound recording. But I wanted to explore the other departments on set. I wanted to shoot, I wanted to, edit and do other things. So I just decided to start doing that. And since then, Factory 75 was born. I have worked with organizations such as Virgin Unite, Virgin Holidays, the Branson Center of Entrepreneurship Caribbean, Digital Foundation. What I find is that most of my corporate work is with companies with philanthropic components to their organization. So I find, and I enjoy doing that. I enjoy working with the children in the school and just recording their stories and being able to document and tell those stories. So most of my work really has been with those organizations.
Alison talks to us about the stages of production.
The idea stage, where you're fleshing it out. Then once you feel like you have a good idea, then you write a treatment, and then you write a script, depending on the project that you're doing. It could be a music video, it could be a short film, documentary, etc., etc. You have to then go ahead and write your script. And then once you have your script down and your characters, then you go ahead and you cast. After you've cast, then you rehearse with your cast, and then you plan your production and you shoot for however long. And then you go into post-production, and post-production is a whole other ball game. You have the first cut, which is just stitching it together according to the script. And then the editor and the director or producer will then sit down and rework it so that what you've shot on set, you could be telling a completely different story in post.
Producing content in Jamaica is expensive, but sometimes the investment is worth it.
If nothing else, Jamaica should be producing more than one feature film every 5 years. If anything, Jamaica should be at a place where it is building the capacity of its filmmakers and its creatives and supporting the filmmakers so much that we are pushing out films like 20 years, we are pushing out films like 5 films every month. So we just have to make film, we just have to make sure. You have to, as I mentioned before, you have to want it. You have to want it, regardless of the setbacks and the times that people tell you no, and you just have to want it. Like at the core of anything, that's the core, that's the essence. You have to want it, and when you want it, it's amazing how things manifest itself, how you are able to get around the obstacles. So you have to want it, you have to be open to criticism, you have to also be open to learning new things and learning outside of being on set, reading articles, reading books, reading discovering new filmmakers, researching the older ones, the ones that, you know, made film what it is. I will always reference Alfred Hitchcock. He is one of my mentors in terms of how he makes films. So I read a lot about him. But you have to, reading and research, you have to, these are things that are like mandatory. It's like you wake up and, you know, you shower, you go to work. It's supposed to be a part of your routine as a filmmaker, as a content producer. You must be reading, you must be current on what's happening, and you must know what happened before. You know, for me, it helps me to focus, because if especially the personal stories of these filmmakers, locally and internationally, you hear, you know, their stories of struggle. The struggle is real, you know, but the struggle empowers, and the struggle fuels the passion, especially for me. So I'm not saying I enjoy the struggle, I don't say, but it is definitely fuel. It fuels me. It pushes me to go even further and further and further, and to discover new things, and to learn new things and meet new people.
Coming up next, Kurt Wright.
Characteristics that lend themselves to filmmaking is probably creativity, being open-minded, and definitely a whole lot of patience.
A graduate of the New York Institute of Technology, Kurt Wright is a local filmmaker who has worked on over 300 projects.
I went to school in New York for 4 years at the New York Institute of Technology. I studied communications, TV, radio, film. Graduated with a bachelor's degree in like 2000, I think, or around there. Yeah, came back home and just started working right away. Day one, second location, Port Antonio Square. Well, I've worked primarily as an assistant director since I came back, you know, whatever it was, 10 years ago. Worked with a lot of really, really good people in the industry. I've been very lucky since I came back. I've gotten to work with Ras Casa, who was kind of like a mentor to me. People like Jay Will, Delano Forbes, you know, just a lot of people who had a lot of experience, and I was able to learn from as I was coming up.
I'll be waiting for you, baby. Just give me that one chance.
So I've worked in everything from music videos to advertisements, feature-length movies, as an assistant director, which is one of the best positions you can be in, to kind of really be next to a director and, you know, kind of learn from his eye and that sort of thing. Characteristics that lend themselves to filmmaking is probably creativity, being open-minded, and definitely a whole lot of patience. What happens a lot in the filmmaking industry is things don't always go as you planned it. So whether or not you're working on something in Jamaica that's a little low-budget thing, or you're working on something in full-blown Hollywood, people are going to be late, stuff gets painted the wrong color, you know what I mean, that sort of thing.
And ready and go!
Passion is integral as well, because it is a sort of industry where a lot of things will happen and sometimes things don't work out, you know, and that's kind of life in general, but especially in the filmmaking industry, you find that things don't work out, and maybe you work for months towards getting something done, and at the very last minute you realize maybe you couldn't get the funding for it, maybe your main actor dropped out, maybe the client, you know, just all sorts of stuff, you know. So if you don't have the passion for it in the first place, the passion is what keeps you going. The filmmaking process goes through 3 stages. So you have pre-production, you have production, and you have post-production. So pre-production, let's take for instance a movie, for example. Pre-production, you need the idea, script gets written, actors get casted, locations get scouted, the funding for the movie is gathered together. So it's all of the preparatory stuff that's needed in order to make the film. Production is the actual making of the film. So that's when everybody comes together, you've hired your crew, your actors are rehearsed, hopefully. You end up on set and you film everything that you need to do. And then post-production afterwards is, once you're finished with the production aspect of it, that's where the footage now comes together. You give it off to the editor, colorist, that sort of thing, the sound mixer, and everything comes together at the end of the day.
So should more be done to teach film?
I don't think a filmmaker necessarily needs to be formally educated. I do believe that it can't hurt to go to school, to go to college, to learn the technical ins and outs, but at the same time, a lot of what you may end up finding from college is that you made the links to different people. So I have friends who work at NBC, I have friends who work at ABC, I have friends who work at Nickelodeon, you know, that kind of, that's not because, oh, I came out, I started working in this industry and I'm some big shot. These are people I went to school with, and we all kind of went in our separate directions with a common passion or a common goal, and we've all ended up in different places. So they might be turning around to say, you know, oh, well, I have this friend in Jamaica who's a filmmaker and we want to go and shoot something there, so let's link him. So for me, that's what college mostly was about. I did learn certain technical aspects of filmmaking, but I don't think I really started learning until I came home to Jamaica and started working in the industry. In terms of projects that I've worked on, as an assistant director, I've worked on close to 300 projects since I've been back, just over the course of the years. Everything from music videos to commercials. We've worked a lot with people like Digicel, worked with Phase 3 on a lot of stage shows at the beginning of my career. As an assistant director though, I've also worked on a few feature films. So things from Rascasa filmed 2 films years ago. One of them in Jamaica, was the assistant director on that, called Good As Gya. Then we went to Trinidad the next year and we filmed another thing called Tribes that I was also one of the assistant directors on. That was a lot of fun. More recently though, I just finished, over the past summer, finished as first AD on Nick Cannon's feature film being done out here called King of the Dancehall.
So what are some issues facing local filmmakers?
One of the key issues I think that needs to be addressed in the Jamaican industry in general is our relationship with Jampro and the actual filmmakers in the country. The lines of communication sometimes tend to get a little bit blurred, which is also why I say I can't necessarily speak for certain things that may or may not have happened at the film festival. Because in a lot of ways I think we feel as filmmakers that we kind of get left in the dark a little bit.
Kurt talks to us about where he would like to see the industry in 20 years.
I'd like to see Jampro and filmmakers in Jamaica having a much better relationship in 20 years. I would like to see Jamaican filmmakers able to create much more than we're creating right now. We have incredible talent in this island. We have incredible talent in this island from uptown, downtown, midtown, all over. Tons of people have ideas, tons of people are very talented, tons of people have this great creative ability, and what they need is an outlet. My advice to newcomers in the industry would, in a lot of ways, tie into a lot of the things that we've said already. Just this, the stuff is there, the information is there, it's accessible. The equipment is there. It's not always the cheapest, but you don't always need the most expensive thing either. As I said, and I can't believe I'm about to say this, but if you have a good cell phone, you can film something. It may not be the best thing, and I hope it wouldn't be the best thing you ever filmed if you shot it off of a cell phone, but the fact is you can also plug a mic into your cell phone's headphone jack, and that'll work as your audio, you know? So there's ways around certain things. Google, YouTube, all of these things have information ready and willing, which is also why I don't think it's necessary to go to school straight after. But if you feel as if you can't afford to go to school, but this is an industry that you're interested in, then put in the work.
That's it this week on CAMEO. Where will our film industry be in 20 years? With the continued efforts of our local filmmakers, the sky is the limit. Until next week, I've been your host, Amitra Fasad Webb.